Hey guys, tonight we step into a Japan that looks nothing like the glossy samurai posters you've seen in movies. You find yourself drifting down a lantern-lit street in Kyoto, but the light feels weak-thin, like the flame itself knows the Ashikaga shoguns are fading into irrelevance. The Muromachi shogunate, the government supposedly running the country, is more or less a decorative relic now. Imagine a CEO who still has the title, but whose employees have all walked off and started their own businesses. That's the vibe. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to play along, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward through Kyoto's narrow lanes. In one alley, the faint odor of miso soup drifts out. In another, you hear the snapping crackle of burning wood, not from a hearth, but from a fire sparked during yet another street skirmish. The shogun's palace still stands, but it's more of a polite suggestion than a seat of power. Ashikaga Yoshiteru, nicknamed the sword Shogun, is technically in charge, but his blade matters more than his decrees. Every daimyo, every warlord treats him like background noise unless his personal guards show up at their gates. You feel the anxiety of walking in a land without a real referee. Provinces break away, like puzzle pieces tumbling off the table. The Onin War, decades earlier, already smashed Kyoto into rubble, leaving entire districts abandoned. Grass grows where noble mansions once held poetry contests. The aristocrats still sip tea and quote Chinese classics, but their voices tremble whenever distant drums remind them who really rules whichever daimyo controls the roads outside their doors this week. If you look west, you sense the Uchi clan trying to control trade through the inland sea fat off Korean imports. To the east, the Hojo family digs in like stubborn barnacles around Odawara Castle, running the Kanto region like it's their private game board. In the center, rivalries overlap like tangled fishing nets. Takeda Shingen's banners flap in Kai Province Uesugi. Kenshin's cavalry gallop down from Echigo, and Imagawa Yoshimoto dreams of dominating Kyoto. Dreams don't last long in this Japan. The common people you included in this little nightmare stroll live in constant whiplash. One day, you're plowing rice for Clan A. The next, you're ordered to feed Clan B's soldiers because Clan A got stomped. Taxes come in rice labor, or sometimes the favor of sending your teenage son off to be a human pincushion in the next battle. Bandits Ronin and burned villages dot the countryside like open wounds. Even shrines can't guarantee safety. Armed monks, the so-called warrior monks, treat holy ground as just another military base. You step onto a wooden bridge and notice how quiet the water is beneath you, as if the river itself is holding its breath. But up ahead, the clang of steel reminds you that the Ashikaga shoguns are stuck in a paradox. They still wear the robes, hold the ceremonies, receive the tributes, but nobody fears their punishment. In politics, fear is the glue. Without it, the whole picture falls apart. And fall apart it does. One evening, you overhear two merchants whispering over their sake cups. Why pay the shogun's tax in Kyoto when the local daimyo will slit our throats tomorrow? That's the logic now. The warlords don't pretend anymore. They mint their own coins, issue their own laws, and expand their castles skyward like stone mushrooms after a storm. The irony. For a culture obsessed with order rituals, for tea etiquette, for sword draws, lists of correct flower arrangements, politics in Japan, at this moment, is the definition of chaos. It's a chessboard where every piece thinks it's the king. You probably won't survive this as a peasant, unless you're unnervingly good at reading which banner is blowing in the wind that morning. And yet, inside this turbulence, the samurai spirit sharpens itself. You imagine yourself slipping into the armor of a minor retainer, lacquered plates rattling as you walk, the smell of horse sweat filling your nostrils. You're sworn to a lord who might fall tomorrow, but your oath is everything. If you die, it's just another tally mark in a ledger where human lives are cheaper than rice bushels. By candlelight, some whisper that Japan needs a unifier, someone ruthless enough to smash this cycle of betrayal and torching villages. But no one agrees on who that savior might be, or whether such a person would be a blessing or a curse. History, of course, will answer. But for now, you drift through a twilight world, a realm of fractured loyalties, faded traditions, and ambitions sharp enough to draw blood. The lantern above your head flickers again, just as a gust of wind carries the sound of distant horns. You glance back at the capital's shadowy silhouette. Behind you, Kyoto looks like a tired old actor, still standing on stage, pretending the audience hasn't already walked out. Ahead lies a Japan, ready to burn itself into something new. You keep walking because the age of samurai is only beginning to bare its teeth. You keep walking down that dirt road, and soon you realize the real actors in this chaotic play aren't the shoguns at all. They're the daimyo. The word itself just means great name. But in this age, a great name comes with walls of stone, fields of rice, and an army that answers only to you. Imagine medieval CEOs with swords and questionable anger management skills, each convinced they should be the next national boss. You trudge past a hillside dotted with half-finished fortifications. The daimyo don't just build castles for defense. They build them as stage sets for ambition. Each rising tower tells neighbors, "Look at me. I have resources. I have laborers. I can pour 10,000 tiles into this roof while you're still patching holes in your palisade." Castles are power statements, Instagram flexes of the 16th century, except instead of likes, they rack up terrified peasants and jealous rivals. You hear names whispered like incantations across the provinces. Takeda Shingen, the tiger of Kai, brilliant and relentless. Uesugi, Kenshin, the dragon of Echigo, pious but fiery, the Hojo family, tightening their grip on the east. And soon, a relatively obscure lord named Oda Nobunaga will claw his way out of obscurity with the subtlety of a thunderclap. But for now, the country is a patchwork quilt, stitched together badly, every daimyo trying to pull the blanket over himself. Life beneath them shifts constantly. Imagine you're a villager hauling rice sacks. Yesterday, you delivered them to Clan Imagawa. Today, men with different banners block the road and tell you that rice now belongs to Clan Oda. Tomorrow, you might deliver it again to yet another lord, provided your village hasn't been reduced to ashes by fire arrows. It's exhausting, and yet the daimyo thrive on this restlessness. Every field, every riverbank, every cart of rice is a chess piece to be seized. You find yourself pausing outside one of those bustling castle towns. Markets hum with activity, smiths hammer out blades, and merchants hawk silks and salt. Daimyo understand that war needs money as much as swords. So they encourage trade even with Europeans who've just arrived by sea. Muskets from Portugal, new shipping routes, strange Christian trinkets, it all becomes fuel for the lord's contests. One daimyo's treasury isn't just coins. It's foreign alliances, naval ports, and access to the all-important rice harvest. When you look closer at the daimyo themselves, you notice two extremes. Some are refined masters of poetry and tea ceremonies, as if culture can soften the sharp edge of their armies. Others are blunt instruments of war, more comfortable on horseback than in a tatami-matted chamber. But either way, they share the same addiction control. And control in this age is measured in territory. Picture yourself at a council meeting. A daimyo spreads out a map brush in hand. He circles one province and murmurs, "We need this river crossing." Another retainer points out, "If we seize that valley, we can starve out the rival clan." It feels like a casual strategy game, but the pieces on that map are real people. Farmers, soldiers, monks, all about to be drafted into the next clash. The most ambitious daimyo aren't content with their little fiefdoms. They dream of Kyoto. Whoever holds the capital can claim legitimacy like putting on a crown, even if it's made of paper. But storming Kyoto isn't easy. It means fighting through dozens of rival territories, each lord ready to stab you in the back the moment you turn your head. Still, ambition drives them forward. Daimyo court alliances like modern politicians court donors. Marriage ties, hostage exchanges, deals scribbled on paper, all can vanish overnight if the winds change. You, as a wandering observer, quickly learn not to trust a handshake. Behind every bow hides the question, when can I use you, and when can I crush you? Yet for all the betrayals and shifting allegiances, daimyo are strangely bound by an unspoken code. Honor matters even if it's selectively applied. A daimyo might slit his cousin's throat in a night raid, then spend the next morning writing a haiku about cherry blossoms. You can't help but smirk at the contradictions. This is a world where poetry and decapitation sit comfortably at the same banquet table. In the distance, drums start again. You imagine two daimyo meeting in battle banners, snapping in the wind, retainers shouting commands, spears clashing like iron rain. Victory means expanding your domain. Defeat means losing everything: your castle, your title, maybe even your head displayed on a pike. The stakes are total. No wonder daimyo sleep lightly, their swords propped beside their pillows. At night, in your little makeshift bedroll, you reflect on what makes these men rise while others fall. Sometimes it's brilliant tactics, sometimes sheer luck. Sometimes a sudden storm drowns one army's supplies while sparing another's. In an age without central law, fortune itself feels like the ultimate daimyo, casually choosing who rules and who burns. And as you drift to sleep, one thought lingers. These ambitious daimyo are not just carving up land, they're setting the stage for giants. From their battles will rise the names you'll remember centuries later. For now, though, Japan is a board where dozens of warlords play, and the game shows no sign of ending. You wake to the sound of a rooster echoing through mist, but before your eyes even adjust, you realize you're not in the glamorous halls of power. You're in a village that smells like smoke manure and damp straw. This is where the real backbone of the Sengoku age lives, not in castles or war councils, but in endless fields of rice. And as you trudge barefoot through the mud with the peasants, you feel how the lives of farmers and samurai intertwine, each feeding the other's existence in this cycle of war. The peasants rise before dawn. Their world is measured in backbreaking chores, tilling rice paddies, hauling buckets, cutting wood. It's easy to forget, in all the flashy swordplay and heroic speeches, that without these laborers, the armies couldn't last a week. Rice isn't just food. It's the currency of the age, the backbone of taxes, and the very blood of samurai stipends. A daimyo's true wealth is measured not in shiny coins, but in how many koku of rice his land produces. A koku, by the way, is about enough rice to feed one person for a year, or if you're greedy, one daimyo for a weekend. The peasants pay their dues, whether they like it or not. Taxes devour half their harvest, sometimes more. Some try to hide sacks of grain in forest pits, but tax collectors with sharp eyes and sharper blades sniff out disobedience. You imagine crouching beside a farmer as he nervously hands over his rice, muttering prayers that his children won't starve before spring. The soldiers standing nearby make sure those prayers stay quiet. And yet, for all their suffering, peasants are not entirely powerless. In this age of war, daimyo need bodies. Villagers can be conscripted into ashigaru, the foot soldiers who pad out the ranks. Picture it one day. You're bent over in a muddy paddy. The next, you're handed a spear, taller than you are, and told to march into enemy territory. Your armor. Maybe some scraps of cloth or leather. If you're lucky, a breastplate passed down from someone less lucky. Ashigaru are the cannon fodder, the walls of bodies that absorb the first shock of cavalry charges. And yet they're also the shock absorbers of innovation. When firearms arrive, it's not the noble samurai who line up with muskets. It's these conscripted peasants. You sense their nervous anticipation powder smoke in their faces, the awkward recoil of a weapon that belches fire louder than any shout. It's both terrifying and oddly empowering. For once, a farmer with a musket can drop an armored knight with a single shot. The battlefield becomes a little less predictable. Now shift your gaze to the samurai themselves. Contrary to popular imagination, they're not constantly dueling in cherry blossom gardens. They're administrators, tax collectors, part-time enforcers, and full-time symbols of authority. You pass one on the road. He wears his two swords, the daisho, at his hip. His walk is deliberate, his gaze sharp, and peasants step aside quickly. You sense both admiration and fear radiating from the villagers. To them, this warrior represents the invisible hand of their daimyo's power. Samurai culture is steeped in rituals that elevate everyday acts into theater. You watch a samurai carefully serve tea, each movement rehearsed as though pouring hot water could be as disciplined as drawing a blade. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about control. If you can master the art of whisking powdered tea into foam without spilling a drop, you can master the art of killing without hesitation. And then there's training. Young samurai drill endlessly in archery, swordsmanship, horseback riding. Picture yourself in the courtyard. Arrows thud into straw targets. Swords clash against wooden posts, sweat dripping as the sun climbs high. The drills are relentless because hesitation on the battlefield is a death sentence. For peasants drafted as ashigaru, training is much rougher if it happens at all. Most learn by surviving their first battle, which is a bit like learning to swim by being tossed into a typhoon. You begin to notice the hierarchy that ties everyone together. Samurai stand above peasants, peasants above artisans, artisans above merchants, at least in theory. Merchants might be considered the lowest rung socially, but in practice many quietly amass wealth by supplying warlords with goods. A rich merchant can sometimes wield more influence than a hungry samurai. It's a paradox. The age glorifies warriors, but the people who sell rice iron or salt quietly shape the balance of power. Daily life under this system is a mix of monotony and sudden terror. Peasants tend their paddies for weeks, only to see them trampled in a single day by marching armies. Women patch clothes, raise children, and sometimes flee into forests when battles sweep through their villages. Samurai households juggle paperwork drills and patrols knowing any order from their lord could summon them to war. You wandering among them feel that underlying hum of uncertainty. Will tomorrow be about planting rice or running for your life? Yet culture persists stubbornly. In between, wars, festivals light up villages. You see peasants dancing in straw hats, drinking cheap sake, and laughing under lanterns. Samurai might compose poetry play go, or admire the moon reflected in a pond. Even in chaos, people carve out little islands of beauty. Perhaps that's the most human trait of all, finding joy, while the world threatens to crumble. And here's the joke hidden in plain sight. While everyone worships the ideal of the noble samurai, most of the dirty work of war is done by grubby farmers yanked from their fields. The romanticized warrior class depends on those they consider beneath them. It's like a boss boasting about his company's great vision, while forgetting his employees are the ones actually making the coffee and fixing the printers. As you settle for the night in a farmer's hut, you hear the quiet shuffle of feet outside. A patrol passes armored men, checking that villagers remain obedient. The crackle of the fire warms your face, but the distant clatter of hooves reminds you peace is fragile, always one raid away from collapse. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow you may wake to rice paddies or to war banners blotting out the sky. In this age, the lives of peasants and samurai are woven so tightly you can't tug one thread without unraveling the whole cloth. Every handful of rice, every arrow fletched, every oath sworn in candlelight, it all feeds into the endless hunger of warlords. You can almost hear the land itself sigh under the weight of it all, waiting for someone ruthless enough to twist this chaos into order. You wake to the chill of dawn rolling over misty mountains, the air sharp with pine and river fog. Your sandals scrape stone as you climb a ridge, and suddenly the valley opens wide before you. Below, banners flutter like restless birds. One side shows the horse-emblazoned red flags of Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai. Across the river, fluttering white banners, with the Buddhist characters for B, announce the dragon of Echigo, Wasugi Kenshin. Even in sleep-deprived haze, you feel the weight of two titans staring each other down across the battlefield of Kawanakajima. It's not just one clash. This is a rivalry that unfolds over years, a deadly series of chess matches played with human pieces. Both Shingen and Kenshin are masters of war, brilliant enough that chroniclers later compare them to legendary Chinese generals. For the people of the Sengoku era, it must have felt like watching gods duel in human form. You creep closer, the valley floor damp with dew. Soldiers crouch behind makeshift palisades, horses snort impatiently, and drums echo against the mountains. Kawanakajima is no ordinary field. It's a funnel, a natural trap between rivers and hills. Whoever controls this ground can punch deep into the other's territory. Shingen, the tiger, is calculating and ruthless, a man who governs with iron discipline. He's known for brilliant cavalry charges and for reshaping his clan into a war machine. His men are drilled like clockwork. His banners flutter with the legendary battle standard swift, as the wind silent, as a forest fierce, as fire immovable as a mountain. It's not just poetry, it's his doctrine. Kenshin the dragon is his perfect opposite. Pious ascetic devoted to Bishamonten. The god of war, he treats battle as sacred ritual. Some say, before every campaign, he fasts and prays, convinced that he is the earthly vessel of a divine warrior. His charisma electrifies his men. They follow him, not just for land or coin, but with near religious fervor. If Shingen is a strategist, Kenshin is a storm. The clashes here aren't clean duels. You feel the ground tremble as thousands move at once, armored Ashigaru, pressing spears forward, samurai on horseback, thundering down slopes. At one battle, Shingen lures Kenshin's forces into an ambush by feigning weakness. At another, Kenshin counterattacks so ferociously that the tiger barely escapes with his life. The most famous moment. You lean forward as the scene sharpens Kenshin himself in the chaos of melee charges straight through the lines and bursts into Shingen's command post. Imagine that lords usually stay behind walls of guards, but here the dragon barrels and sword flashing and slashes at the tiger face to face. Shingen caught sitting parries with nothing more than his iron war fan, holding back the dragon's blade until his retainers rush in. It's a clash so dramatic, you'd expect Hollywood to tone it down, as too unrealistic. And yet it happened. You can almost hear the sharp intake of breath from soldiers on both sides. For a heartbeat, Japan's fate hangs on whether one man's sword cuts through another's fan. Then the moment passes. The two rivals survive their armies' reel, and the war grinds on. No decisive victor, just a rivalry deepened like scars. For the peasants in nearby villages, though, this epic is just terror. Fields get trampled, houses burned, families uprooted. You pass one farmhouse reduced to cinders, a broken toy lying in the mud. To chroniclers, Kawanakajima is grand strategy. To locals, it's yet another disaster. What strikes you most is the sheer futility. After 5 major battles here, neither tiger nor dragon gains lasting ground. It's as though the mountains themselves mock their ambitions, refusing to let either side fully win. And yet their reputations only grow. To samurai across Japan, these campaigns become legends, the ultimate test of skill and courage. In the quiet after battle, you picture Shingen and Kenshin retreating to their respective castles. One plots, reorganizes, sharpens his army into an even deadlier machine. The other prays, sharpens his resolve, and waits for the next campaign. Between them lies a valley soaked with sweat and blood, a landscape forever scarred by their rivalry. As you turn away, you realize something. While the tiger and the dragon exhaust themselves, another player far away watches and waits. A lesser lord, eccentric and ruthless, who will learn from their struggles and then tear the whole board apart. But for now, the valley echoes only with silence, broken lances, and the whisper that even giants sometimes cancel each other out. The smoke of Kawanakajima fades behind you, and your sandals crunch into a different kind of battlefield. Not a valley soaked in cavalry charges, but the cluttered, restless heart of Owari province. Here in a land not especially rich nor particularly grand, a young daimyo sharpens his teeth. His name is Oda Nobunaga, and if the tiger and the dragon were forces of nature, this man is lightning, unpredictable, blinding, and utterly devastating. You first hear of him in whispers. Locals call him the Utsuk, the Fool of Owari. He wears his hair loose, dresses in outlandish clothes, and spends time wandering the streets instead of sitting in his castle. You imagine him pelting through town with a half-drunk grin, shocking his retainers by eating with peasants, ignoring strict formalities, or firing muskets for fun. The old guard shake their heads. This boy will ruin his clan, they say. But beneath the eccentric mask, Nobunaga watches, learns, and calculates. One summer day, you follow him up the slope of Kiyosu Castle, and suddenly his frivolous laughter hardens into command. Nobunaga knows Owari is weak, hemmed in by stronger neighbors like the Imagawa and the Saito. He knows his enemies dismiss him as a clown, and he knows that in a land as chaotic as Sengoku Japan, the underestimated man has the sharpest edge. The mask of madness hides steel. At his father's funeral, he deliberately threw ceremonial incense on the altar like a street thug. Retainers were horrified what lord insults the ancestors, but the act tested loyalty. Would his men stand by him even when he shattered tradition? Some deserted. Those who remained Nobunaga could trust them. He wasn't careless. He was culling. His first step to power is brutal. He burns Buddhist monasteries that challenge him. To modern ears, it sounds shocking. Aren't temples sacred? But these are not passive shrines. They're fortresses manned by warrior monks, armed to the teeth collecting taxes like petty daimyo. Nobunaga sees them as parasites. By torching their strongholds, he announces to the world, this is not an age for half measures. You can almost smell the acrid smoke curling above the rooftops, hear the chants dissolving into screams, and feel the weight of his gamble. For peasants who once bowed before monks as untouchable authorities, the sight is electrifying. Nobunaga dares what others don't. Step closer into his camp, and the innovations pile up. He reorganizes his army into disciplined ranks, not just the noble cavalry charges of old, but formations that combine Ashigaru spearmen with musket volleys. Where other lords cling to tradition, he experiments like a mad scientist. Firearms, which some dismiss as dishonorable, become his favorite toys. He sees them not as threats to samurai honor, but as tools to break the entire chessboard. Imagine being a seasoned mounted knight proud of your blade, only to be dropped in seconds by a half-trained peasant with a gun. Nobunaga relishes that irony. At night, he studies maps by candlelight, plotting moves that seem insane until they work. One retainer mutters, "My lord, you risk too much." Nobunaga smirks and replies, "To risk nothing is to gain nothing." It's the sort of line you'd roll your eyes at if it weren't backed by victories. You sense that to him, war is not just survival, it's theater. He terrifies enemies by unpredictability, and half the battle is making them think, what insane thing will Nobunaga do next? He also knows the power of spectacle. In Kyoto, aristocrats might sneer at his rough manners, but peasants love the way he walks among them. He throws coin into crowds, rewards bravery with sudden promotions, and recruits men from humble birth. To him, ability outweighs pedigree. That sandal-bearer in his retinue, Nobunaga, treats him with unusual trust. Later, you'll remember his name, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who will rise from carrying his lord's shoes to unifying all Japan. But for now, he is just another spark in Nobunaga's orbit. Then comes the summer of 1560, and everything tilts. Word spreads Imagawa Yoshimoto, a powerful daimyo to the east, has marched with a massive army, perhaps 20,000 men, toward Kyoto, using Owari as a stepping stone. Nobunaga has only $2,000 or $3,000 at best. Common sense says he should surrender, hide, or pray. But Nobunaga, he laughs. You trail him to Atsuta Shrine, where he beats drums and dances before the gods. He knows morale matters as much as numbers. His men, though badly outnumbered, catch fire from his reckless confidence. Imagine a modern coach hyping a doomed underdog team. He convinces them they can topple giants. As dawn breaks, Nobunaga leads his tiny force out of Kiyosu Castle. Instead of sitting tight, he takes the offensive. He moves quickly, his soldiers melting into forests and ravines, hiding from Imagawa scouts. Then the heavens themselves lend a hand. A sudden thunderstorm lashes the land, drenching the Imagawa army as it rests confident of easy victory. Nobunaga seizes the moment. His men erupt from the hills, charging into Yoshimoto's camp. Chaos unfolds. You picture Yoshimoto lounging in his tent, enjoying sake after a successful march, when suddenly spears and blades tear through the canvas. He reportedly thinks it's a drunken brawl until he sees Nobunaga's men charging in with fire in their eyes. Within minutes, Yoshimoto has cut down his head, taken his great army scattering like startled birds. The Battle of Okehazama becomes legend. With perhaps 3,000 men, Nobunaga topples a force nearly 7 times his size. It's not just victory, it's shock therapy for Japan. Warlords across the land suddenly stop laughing at the fool of Owari. Nobunaga has announced himself as a player, not through patience or pedigree, but through audacity. That night, you sit by a fire, the smell of wet ash clinging to your clothes, and watch Nobunaga laugh with his generals. His confidence is infectious. He doesn't look like a man who just escaped impossible odds. He looks like a man who expected to win all along. You can't help but notice the contrast with the tiger and the dragon who fought endlessly but gained little. Nobunaga doesn't just fight, he transforms. Every step, every blaze, every insult he hurls at convention, it all reshapes Japan's future. And here's the ironic joke. You can't ignore, the fool of Owari is the one who rewrites the rules. The man laughed at, for his eccentricity, becomes the nightmare, whispered in enemy castles. You feel a chill, not from the night air, but from the realization that you are watching the fuse being lit on a powder keg. Nobunaga is no clown. He is the storm gathering on the horizon, and by the time people stop laughing, it will already be too late. The rain of Okehazama has barely dried when you notice something shifting across Japan's battlefields. The clang of swords, the pounding of hooves, yes, those still dominate. But now another sound slices through the chaos, the sharp crack of gunfire. You blink as smoke clouds roll across the fields, and in that haze, you realize the samurai's world of bows and blades is being rewritten by something far louder and far less poetic. Firearms arrive in Japan by accident or fate, depending on how you tell the story. Portuguese traders blown off course in 1543 land on Tanegashima, a small island in southern Japan. They show off their arquebuses, matchlock muskets that look awkward smell of sulfur and make thunder with each shot. The local lord buys a few curious about their strange power. Within months, Japanese blacksmiths are dismantling them, figuring out how to copy and improve them. It doesn't take long before the arquebus is no longer exotic, it's essential. You trudge through a workshop in Sakai, where craftsmen hammer out barrels, drill locks, and fit wooden stocks. The city buzzes with energy. Merchants grow rich trading powder and lead, and warlords line up orders like samurai at a noodle stall. You hear one smith boast he can produce hundreds of guns a year. What began as a foreign curiosity is now mass production. On the battlefield, the change is jarring. You watch as a Shigeru line up with their muskets, awkward but determined. They bite cartridges, load powder, ram balls, and lift barrels. The commander shouts, fire bursts in unison, and a wall of smoke drifts forward. Horses rear, armored men fall, and the old confidence of mounted samurai cracks. Imagine spending a lifetime perfecting your sword technique only to be felled by a farmer with a noisy stick. It's enough to make even the proudest knight feel obsolete. Some cling to tradition. Firearms are dishonorable, they mutter. They lack skill. But others, especially Oda Nobunaga, smell opportunity. You remember his grin at Okehazama. To him, guns are not dishonorable, they're efficient. He sees that technology can level the field, stripping away the advantage of noble lineage and elite training. In his eyes, war is not about preserving honor, but about winning. And guns win. Nobunaga doesn't just buy arquebuses, he rewrites tactics around them. You watch him at Nagashino years later, arranging ashigaru with muskets behind wooden palisades. Instead of one volley, he drills them to fire in rotating ranks, while one row shoots the next reloads, creating continuous thunder. It's not elegant, it's not heroic, but it shreds Takeda cavalry, once considered unstoppable. Horses scream, riders topple, and suddenly the proud tiger's legacy buckles under gunpowder smoke. The irony is delicious. For centuries, Japanese warfare celebrated the individual duel, knight against knight, sword against spear. Now victory comes from rows of peasants firing in rhythm. Honor bends to practicality. You hear mutters among old samurai. Is this truly the way of the warrior? But history doesn't care about their discomfort. History cares about results, and the musket delivers them. Still, guns don't erase the old ways overnight. You wander past a training field where young samurai still practice with bows, their arrows whispering through the air. Swordsmanship remains sacred. But now, these arts coexist uneasily with firepower. The battlefield becomes a collage. Archers, spearmen, musketeers, cavalry, all jostling for dominance. It's messy, chaotic, and strangely modern. The impact ripples beyond combat. Armories expand trade booms, alliances shift. Peasants conscripted as ashigaru suddenly matter more than before. A farmer with a musket can kill a noble on horseback. Hierarchy doesn't feel quite as unshakable. You can almost hear the social order creak under the weight of gunpowder. And here's your sardonic bedtime observation. The samurai spent centuries perfecting a way of life around sharp steel and rigid honor, only for Europe to accidentally drop off noise sticks that render half of it obsolete. It's like training your whole life to be a master swordsman, then losing a duel to someone who just bought a Nerf gun from across the sea. Except in this case, the Nerf darts are lethal, and they come by the thousand. Yet for all the thunder and smoke, the sword doesn't disappear. It lingers symbolic and personal. The daisho, long and short swords, remains the soul of the samurai. Firearms may win wars, but swords still define identity. You sense the contradiction. The samurai clings to honor, while embracing pragmatism, living in both worlds at once. As you drift off beside the campfire, the last sounds in your ears aren't clashing blades, but the echo of gunfire rolling across hills. The age of the sword isn't gone, but it has competition now, loud and smoky, and there's no turning back. The morning haze rolls off the fields of Owari, and you march with Nobunaga's men, the smell of wet grass and horses heavy in the air. Word spreads like wildfire. Imagawa Yoshimoto is coming. He isn't just another local daimyo flexing his muscles. He's a giant, a warlord, with ambitions to sweep across the whole country and bend Kyoto to his will. His force is said to number around 20,000, maybe more banners snapping, like a forest of red and white sails, drums booming with confidence. He is so sure of his power that his men boast openly within weeks they will be drinking tea in the capital. And then you glance at Nobunaga's camp, barely 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers, most of them Ashikaga peasants, conscripted into war with borrowed armor and spears taller than themselves. The odds are absurd. Any sane warlord would hide behind castle walls, beg for alliances, or surrender territory just to stay alive. But Nobunaga. He laughs. He beats war drums. He leads his men in a victory dance before the battle even begins. And he makes offerings at Atsuta Shrine as though the gods themselves are on his payroll. His retainers at first bewildered catch fire from his audacity. You can almost taste the nervous energy in the air. It's equal parts terror and exhilaration. You march out with him, feeling the raw confidence radiating from every step. Nobunaga doesn't creep cautiously. He storms forward. His men sing as they march, rattling spears against shields, their voices carrying far beyond their small numbers. If you didn't know better, you'd think this was a festival procession, not an army heading into the jaws of destruction. Nobunaga's gamble isn't just about fighting, it's about psychology. If his own men believe they're marching to certain death, they'll break. If they believe they're part of destiny, they'll follow him into hell. By midday, scouts confirm Yoshimoto's army has stopped to rest at Okehazama. It's hot, humid, the kind of Japanese summer day where sweat clings before you even start moving. The Imagawa troops, after days of marching through narrow valleys, loosen their armor and lounge in their tents. Food and sake flow. Performers are summoned to keep spirits high. Yoshimoto himself reclines under a brocade canopy, smug in the certainty that Owari already belongs to him. He imagines Kyoto within his grasp. To his men, the battle feels over before it has even begun. But you crouch with Nobunaga's men in a thicket nearby. The air feels heavy, electric. Suddenly clouds gather. A summer storm crashes down, rain slashing sideways, thunder rolling across the hills. You grip your spear tighter, drenched to the bone. For most armies, this weather would be disaster camps, flooding, morale sinking. But Nobunaga grins. He sees the storm as his ally, masking the movement of his men, muffling the sound of their approach. Then, as the rain breaks, Nobunaga unleashes his strike. His army bursts from the ravines, sprinting down on Yoshimoto's camp like lightning splitting the sky. You charge with them feet, slipping in the mud, heart hammering as the shouts rise. The Imagawa camp erupts in chaos, soldiers grabbing half-wet armor, stumbling over guy ropes, crashing into one another. Arrows whistle swords, clash. Smoke rises from torches set to tents. And in that storm of confusion, you glimpse the unthinkable. Nobunaga's men slice their way toward Yoshimoto's personal tent. Guards scramble to defend him, but most are caught off guard, drunk or panicked. Yoshimoto, they say, at first thinks it's a drunken brawl among his men. He rises, irritated only to see enemy spears and flashing blades cutting through the canvas. Within minutes, the proud warlord is struck down, his head taken. It is hoisted high, dripping a grisly banner, announcing the impossible: Yoshimoto is dead. Panic detonates like powder across the field. 20,000 men scatter as though the earth itself has opened beneath them. Without their leader, cohesion evaporates. Some throw down weapons, others trample each other in desperate flight. Nobunaga, drenched and roaring with triumph, stands among his men, transformed before your eyes. He looks less like a fool and more like a storm-made flesh lightning that has chosen a human shape. The victory at Okahazama is not just a battle, it's a miracle. Nobunaga has destroyed a vastly superior force through audacity, speed, and a little help from the weather gods. You can almost hear the gossip racing across Japan. The fool of Owari crushed the Imagawa with barely 3,000 men. Warlords who once laughed at his antics now feel a cold trickle of fear down their spines. He is no eccentric clown. He is something new, something terrifying. You wander through the wreckage afterward, overturned sack cups, broken lances, silk tents shredded and soaked in mud. The smell of blood mingles with wet grass. Somewhere, a horse screams riderless, entangled in ropes. What was supposed to be Yoshimoto's grand parade to Kyoto has ended in a single stormy afternoon of humiliation. His ambitions die with him, and the Imagawa clan fractures almost overnight. For Nobunaga, the road to greatness has just opened. With Yoshimoto gone, rival clans that once trembled under the Imagawa banner now look around nervously. Some rush to pledge allegiance to Nobunaga, hoping to avoid his wrath. Others plot in silence, knowing this rising star could burn them next. You can feel the ripples spreading outward like the shockwave after a thunderclap. That night you sit by a fire, the smell of wet ash clinging to your clothes, and watch Nobunaga laugh with his generals. His confidence is infectious. He doesn't look like a man who just escaped impossible odds. He looks like a man who expected to win all along. He drinks deeply, rewards bravery with promotions, and even cracks jokes at his enemy's expense. You sense that this victory isn't just military, it's psychological. He has convinced his followers that with him, anything is possible. And here's the cheeky reality check. In a land obsessed with honor and proper order, it isn't tradition that wins today. It isn't the carefully polished sword or the perfect pedigree. It's chaos timing and sheer nerve. Nobunaga proves that a daring gamble played at the perfect moment can topple giants. You think of all those daimyo polishing their etiquette and sharpening their swords, and you can't help but chuckle, because tonight, the fool of Owari sleeps as the most dangerous man in Japan. You leave the muddy wreck of Okahazama behind, but Nobunaga doesn't rest on his laurels. Victory has emboldened him, and now he sets his sights not just on rival daimyo, but on something even older, deeper and thornier, the power of faith itself. Japan in this age isn't simply a patchwork of castles and farms. It's also a land riddled with militant temples. Warrior monks, Sohei, march like private armies, and Buddhist leagues called Iki control entire provinces. To many villagers, these holy men are both protectors and extortionists. They preach the Dharma with one hand and carry naginata with the other. 2. Nobunaga. They're competitors plain and simple. You trudge into a province where one of these leagues holds sway. The great fortress temple of Enryakuji looms on Mount Hiei, its monks armed chanting sutras with one eye on their rice stores. They claim divine mandate, but their numbers and wealth rival any daimyo. Pilgrims climb the mountain with offerings. Warriors descend it with spears. For generations, emperors and shoguns have tolerated them, fearing the spiritual and military backlash of interference. But Nobunaga looks at the temple walls and sees not holiness, but opposition. Before striking at the great mountain, he sharpens his claws on lesser temples. You march with his men through Omi province, where a fortified temple has joined the leagues. Inside, monks beat drums, banners with sacred texts fluttering in the wind. Their faith seems unshakable until the first volley of arquebus fire smashes through their gates. Nobunaga's soldiers pour in smoke filling the air. You watch in uneasy silence as gilded statues crack in the heat, their serene faces glowing orange before collapsing. Faith collides with ambition, and ambition wins. But the true reckoning comes in 1571. Nobunaga decides to break the back of Buddhist power by annihilating Enryakuji itself. This isn't some rural stronghold. It's the holiest temple complex in Japan, a mountain fortress bristling with shrines, pagodas, and thousands of warrior monks. To defile it is unthinkable. To destroy it is to challenge heaven. You climb with Nobunaga's army up the slopes of Mount Hiei. The air is sharp mountain pines, whispering as if they know what's coming. Prayer slips flutter in the breeze, tied to branches by pilgrims hoping for blessings. You can feel history pressing on your shoulders. For centuries, emperors have bowed to this mountain. Shoguns have feared it. Yet Nobunaga marches upward without hesitation, his matchlock squads at the ready. At the summit, the monks are waiting. Their chants echo like thunder across the ridges. They believe the gods will strike down anyone who dares profane this sacred ground. Some brandish weapons, others sit cross-legged in meditation, serene, even as flames begin to kindle in the distance. For a brief moment you wonder, will lightning crack from the heavens? Will Nobunaga, the so-called fool of Owari, finally be punished by divine wrath? But the only lightning comes from gunfire. Nobunaga's soldiers swarm the temples, setting fire to ancient cedar halls. Flames leap skyward, smoke blankets the mountain, and the chanting turns to screams. Wooden pagodas collapse in roaring avalanches of sparks. Statues of the Buddha, carved centuries before, glow and crack under the heat until their faces melt into nothingness. The smell of burning silk and cedar sears your lungs. The slaughter is merciless. Monks are cut down as they flee. Women and children perish in the flames. Nobunaga gives no quarter. For him, compassion would only sow future rebellion. He means to root out the power of the temples completely, even if it means being remembered as a demon. By nightfall, Enryakuji is ashes the mountain a red smear against the horizon, visible all the way from Kyoto. This isn't just destruction, it's a message carved into the bones of Japan. Nobunaga shows that no force, not even centuries of sacred tradition, will stand in his way. The effect is immediate. Daimyo gape at his audacity. The imperial court, powerless and timid, murmurs, prayers but does nothing. Common folk whisper that he must be the reincarnation of a demon king sent to purge the land or to curse it. You overhear peasants muttering nervously in villages, "If even the Buddha's mountain can burn, what hope have we?" And here lies the paradox. Nobunaga is not faithless. He offers prayers before battle, visits shrines, and invokes divine favor when it suits him. He is not anti-religion. He is anti-rival power. To him, religion is acceptable as ritual, not as an armed political force. In his eyes, the future belongs to whoever controls steel rice and muskets, not sutras. As you wander through the blackened ruins, the scene is haunting. Charred beams jut into the sky like skeletal fingers. Ash drifts down like snowflakes. You step over a child's sandal lying in the rubble, a silent reminder that wars against temples don't spare innocents. History will record this act as one of Nobunaga's most infamous decisions, proof of both his ruthlessness and his clarity of vision. Yet amid the horror, you sense why it worked. Japan is stunned. No daimyo, no emperor, no shogun has dared such a thing. Nobunaga has severed the invisible cord that bound politics to the sanctity of religion. The Buddhist leagues will never wield unchecked authority again. He has proven that the old order, sacred or not, can be toppled by sheer will. As the night wind whistles through skeletal pagodas, you can almost hear Nobunaga's voice. Better one mountain of fire now than centuries of meddling monks later. And whether you admire or despise him, you cannot deny his impact. The ground itself seems to tremble, as though the land has realized a new law is in place. Tradition is no shield, and only those bold enough to burn away the past will survive. The mountain still smolders in your memory when whispers of betrayal begin to seep into the corridors of Kyoto. Nobunaga has torched temples, toppled rivals, and carved a bloody path toward domination. His banners fly boldly. His enemies fall like wheat before the scythe. And yet it isn't a foreign invader, a monk, or even the Tiger of Kai, who finally strikes the deepest wound. It's one of his own. You walk with him through the narrow streets of the capital in 1582. The city has changed under his shadow. Merchants thrive. Under the order he imposes, nobles keep their heads down, and commoners dare to believe the chaos might finally be settling. Nobunaga himself struts with that half-mocking confidence, the kind that unnerves allies as much as it terrifies enemies. But behind the bowing retainers, behind the polite courtiers, one man is quietly sharpening his knife, Akechi Mitsuhide. Mitsuhide is no fool. He's a cultured general, a man of refined taste, more scholar than brute, and Nobunaga has entrusted him with command many times. But Nobunaga's cruelty, his arrogance, his constant insults cut deep. Some say Mitsuhide's mother was humiliated by Nobunaga. Others whisper about land disputes, or a fragile pride ground down by years of mockery. Whatever the spark, resentment grows in silence until it bursts into flame. The setting is Honnō-ji, a temple in Kyoto, where Nobunaga lodges while preparing to join his armies fighting in the west. You picture him waking lazily in his chambers, walls hung with painted screens, incense curling lazily in the morning air. He's brought only a handful of guards, relaxed, perhaps too confident that his enemies are all far away. Outside, the city stirs with normal sounds, merchants calling sandals, slapping monks chanting. Nothing seems amiss. Then just as dawn breaks, you hear it, the shuffle of armored feet, the bark of orders. Mitsuhide's troops surround the temple. Their banners snap in the early light. The trap has sprung. The enemy is at Honnō-ji, someone shouts, and the serenity of the temple shatters. Inside, chaos erupts. Nobunaga's retainers scramble for weapons, rushing to defend their lord. The air fills with the clang of steel, the acrid smell of smoke as fire arrows streak overhead. You dash through the courtyard, seeing Nobunaga himself emerge, his face lit with disbelief, turning swiftly into cold fury. Betrayal is rare enough, but from Mitsuhide, his own vassal. The audacity cuts deeper than any blade. He fights with ferocity. You imagine him cutting through attackers, his sword flashing in the dim light, his voice carrying above the din. But Mitsuhide's men swarm the temple timbers, crackle, and flames crawl along the eaves. Nobunaga realizes the truth. He is surrounded, outnumbered, his fate sealed. In that moment, he chooses not to die at an enemy's hand. Retreating into a chamber, he orders the temple set ablaze. The walls glow orange heat surges. He kneels, composes himself, and commits seppuku, ending his life on his own terms. His body vanishes into the inferno. The demon king, who torched holy mountains and defied centuries of tradition, meets his end in a storm of fire consumed by the very element he had wielded so mercilessly. Outside the streets of Kyoto buzz with shock. Nobunaga is dead. The words echo like thunder. Merchants, monks, courtiers, all stare toward the smoke pillar rising from Honnō-ji. Some feel relief, others terror. A man who seemed unstoppable has fallen not by war, but by betrayal. Mitsuhide seizes power, declaring himself shogun in all but name. For 13 brief days, he struts in Nobunaga's place. But betrayal breeds more betrayal. Other warlords smelling opportunity close in like wolves. Hideyoshi, yes, the sandal-bearer turned general, races back from campaign swearing vengeance. Mitsuhide's reign collapses almost before it begins. For you walking among the smoldering ruins of Honnō-ji, the lesson is sharp. Nobunaga's brilliance, his ruthlessness, his daring, none of it saved him from the blade hidden within his own household. It's almost poetic in a grim, bedtime story kind of way. The man who trusted only in power is undone by the weakness of trust itself. The irony doesn't escape you. Nobunaga burned temples, toppled clans, and dared the gods to stop him. In the end, it wasn't divine retribution or foreign armies that felled him. It was the quiet resentment of a man who knew him best. The smoke of Honnō-ji still clings to your clothes when you hear another name whispered through Japan's war camps and castle halls, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Just weeks ago, he was still Nobunaga's loyal general, racing across the land to conquer in his master's name. Now the master is gone, consumed by fire and betrayal, and everyone asks the same question: who will seize the vacuum? You march with Hideyoshi's troops as he rushes back from the western front, his sandals worn thin, his banners snapping in the wind. He moves with urgency, not just to avenge Nobunaga, but to seize the chance that fate has dropped into his lap. Akechi Mitsuhide, fresh from murdering his lord, barely has time to warm his stolen throne. Within 13 days, Hideyoshi crashes into him at Yamazaki. The battle is swift, merciless. Mitsuhide is routed, hunted down, and killed while fleeing. His short reign ends as a footnote, while Hideyoshi emerges as the avenger and the new rising star. What makes this story extraordinary is not just Hideyoshi's timing, but his origins. You remember him first as Nobunaga's sandal-bearer, a man of peasant birth with no noble lineage, no illustrious ancestors to invoke. In a rigid society, obsessed with bloodlines, this should have doomed him to obscurity. Yet here he is, climbing from the dust of the roads to the height of power. It's as if Japan's chaos has cracked open the rigid caste system, just enough for a genius to slip through. You watch him closely, and you see why men rally to him. Hideyoshi isn't as cold or terrifying as Nobunaga. Where Nobunaga inspired fear, Hideyoshi inspires loyalty, with warmth, humor, and a kind of sly charm. He jokes with soldiers, remembers names, rewards merit over pedigree. He bends, he flatters, he cajoles, but behind the smile lies steel. His brilliance isn't just on the battlefield, but in weaving alliances, smoothing egos, and turning rivals into reluctant allies. Take the Great Council held after Nobunaga's death. Several of Nobunaga's heirs and generals expect to inherit his mantle. Hideyoshi plays them like a shamisen. He bows when he must, flatters when it suits him, and when persuasion fails, he shows his sharp claws. One by one, he outmaneuvers them until the coalition falls into his hands. He declares loyalty to Nobunaga's descendants while quietly ensuring he holds the reins. You can almost see him grinning as other warlords realize too late they've been outplayed. On the battlefield, Hideyoshi proves equally resourceful. You follow him into the Chigoku campaign, where he employs trickery as much as brute force. He lays siege to castles, not by endless assaults, but by cutting supply lines flooding valleys or persuading defenders to switch sides. He wages war with patience and guile, preferring to win without spilling more blood than necessary. And yet, when needed, he strikes decisively, his armies sweeping across provinces like waves. By the mid-1580s, Hideyoshi dominates central Japan. Daimyo, who once sneered at his peasant birth, now bow some out of respect others, out of sheer survival instinct. His charisma radiates in every encounter. One story has him charming a rival lord's retainers by distributing gifts and laughing with them late into the night, only to wake the next morning and accept the lord's surrender. You realize that Hideyoshi conquers not just with steel, but with smiles. And yet beneath the warmth, he is every bit as ambitious as Nobunaga. He dreams of unification, not just controlling Kyoto, but binding the whole fractured land under one banner. He works tirelessly to centralize authority, redistributing land, taking hostages to ensure loyalty, and enforcing new rules that remind daimyo who really calls the shots. The most radical step, Hideyoshi enforces the sword hunt. You stand in a village square as officials collect weapons from peasants, stacking spears and swords into towering piles. Officially, the weapons are melted into statues for temples. Unofficially, it's about stripping the common folk of military power, locking the samurai class firmly above them. The boy, who once carried sandals, now carries the authority to reshape society itself. You notice how different his style is from Nobunaga's. Where Nobunaga burned opposition to ash, Hideyoshi coaxes co-ops, and only when cornered does he crush. His hands are just as bloody, but he hides the stains beneath silk gloves. And the country, exhausted by decades of chaos, seems willing to accept him as the man to finally bring peace, so long as they don't look too closely at how he achieves it. By the 1590s, Hideyoshi has done the unthinkable. From the narrow, muddy fields of Owari, a peasant-born upstart has unified Japan under his authority. You stand at Osaka Castle, his grand fortress, rising like a mountain of stone and timber, glittering with golden tiles. It is the physical symbol of his triumph, a statement that the age of endless war is ending and a new order is here. And yet, as you look at him standing atop the ramparts, surveying his domain with satisfaction, you sense that his hunger is not yet sated. For Hideyoshi, unifying Japan is only the beginning. His eyes are already turning outward across the sea toward bigger dreams and more dangerous gambles. The banners of unification flutter proudly over Osaka Castle, and for a moment you allow yourself to believe Japan might finally rest. The fields that once burned now whisper with wind through rice stalks, and merchants in Kyoto count their coins without glancing nervously over their shoulders. But Hideyoshi, once sandal-bearer, now master of the realm, isn't built for rest. Where Nobunaga dreamed of domination within Japan, Hideyoshi dreams of horizons. His gaze drifts across the sea to Korea, and beyond it to Ming China. You walk with him through the glittering halls of Osaka Castle, where maps of the continent lie spread across lacquered tables. He points at them with the same confidence he once pointed at Japanese valleys. "We will march to Ming," he declares, "and Japan will rule all beneath heaven." Courtiers nod nervously, some dazzled, others alarmed. But who dares argue Hideyoshi has bent every daimyo in Japan to his will? To oppose him is to risk everything. The first invasion begins in 1592. You sail with his troops across the treacherous straits to Korea, the salt wind whipping your face. At first, it seems like Hideyoshi's audacity might triumph yet again. Japanese armies storm Busan, then surge northward, muskets cracking, banners streaming. Korean defenders falter their fortresses, collapsing in days. Villages quake under the thunder of marching boots. For a brief, heady season, it looks as if Hideyoshi might carve a path straight to China. But the dream unravels. You tramp through muddy Korean fields as supply lines stretch thin. The Japanese advance stalls not from lack of courage, but from sheer geography and resistance. Korean guerrillas strike supply convoys, ambushes sprout from forests. Peasants sabotage the invaders with fire and blades hidden in baskets. Worse still, the seas turn hostile. You hear the thunder of cannons offshore as Admiral Yi Sun-sin's famed turtle ships cut through Japanese fleets, turning straits into watery graveyards. The soldiers who once boasted of conquering all Asia now huddle in damp forts, their armor-rusting bellies empty. Letters home tell of starvation, endless skirmishes, and the haunting realization that the farther they march, the farther home feels. You sit beside exhausted Ashikaga, gnawing on half-rotten rice, listening to them mutter that perhaps their lord's vision has reached too far. Still, Hideyoshi refuses to accept defeat. He orders reinforcements, launches a second invasion in 1597, and pours resources into a dream that seems more fantasy than strategy. Once again, Japanese armies swarm Korean soil. Once again, Yi Sun-sin and the stubborn resistance grind them down. This time, exhaustion is palpable. You see it in the eyes of generals, in the sluggish marches of troops, in the quiet despair of peasants dragged from their fields to serve in distant wars. Meanwhile, back in Japan, the unity Hideyoshi forged begins to tremble. Daimyo grumble under the burden of supplying endless campaigns. Samurai families watch their sons vanish overseas, some never to return. The country is unified. Yes, but that unity frays when stretched too thin. You sense the irony in every step of this march. The man who rose from nothing, who conquered a fractured Japan with charm and cunning, now risks it all chasing glory across the sea. For a brief time, he seemed unstoppable, his will bending mountains. Yet here in the mud of Korea, the limits of ambition reveal themselves. And still, Hideyoshi clings to his dream. Even as sickness begins to gnaw at him in his later years, even as whispers of his mortality ripple through the court, he talks of conquering China as if it were tomorrow's chore. You stand at his side, hearing the rasp in his breath, watching him gaze across the waves toward a land he will never rule. The invasions ultimately sputter, their only legacy piles of bones scattered across Korean hillsides and villages burned to ash. For Japan, the cost is staggering: thousands of lives, a treasury strained, and a fragile unity shaken. For Hideyoshi, the dream of empire beyond the sea becomes a ghost that haunts his final days. As you step back onto Japanese soil, the salty air still clinging to your clothes, you realize what his story teaches. A peasant's son may rise to rule a nation, but even he cannot command. Oceans cannot bend foreign lands to his will. Hideyoshi's genius unified Japan, but his hubris bled it. And as the sun sets red over Osaka Castle, you feel it in your bones. The age is turning again. Hideyoshi's life nears its end, and with it, the fragile balance he created. The land holds its breath, bracing for the storm to come once more. You linger in the echo of crashing waves and broken armies, and soon the sound that fills the air is quieter, more unsettling, the cough of a dying man. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, once the barefoot peasant who rose to unify Japan, is fading. His hair is thinned, his body shrinks, but his ambition still burns in his eyes, a fever dream he cannot release. You sit in Osaka Castle in the summer of 1598, watching him clutch maps of Korea and China, still speaking of campaigns as though he has decades left to fight them. His generals bow and nod, their faces carefully blank, but you sense the truth behind their silence. The master's body is failing, and the dream of empire abroad is already ash. Even as his strength wanes, Hideyoshi's mind returns obsessively to the future of his bloodline. He has poured everything into building a legacy that will outlast him, yet his only heir is a child, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, just a toddler. You picture the boy toddling through gilded halls, oblivious to the weight pressing down on his tiny shoulders. Hideyoshi gathers his most trusted generals and counselors, Tokugawa Ieyasu among them, and forms a council of 5 regents tasked with ruling until Hideyoshi comes of age. He demands that they swear loyalty to his son to preserve the Toyotomi name. His voice is hoarse, but his eyes blaze. Swear to me, he insists that you will protect him. They bow, they murmur assent, but you can feel the tension like a drawn bowstring. Because here lies the great flaw in Hideyoshi's grand design. He has unified Japan by sheer force of personality, by charisma and cunning, by balancing rivals with promises and threats. But personality dies with the man. His system of regents is paper thin, a patch placed over a crack in the dam. The daimyo are loyal to him, but to his infant son, to each other, that is another matter entirely. When he finally passes, Osaka castle falls into an eerie stillness. Courtiers weep, soldiers kneel, and commoners whisper prayers. Outside, the cicadas scream in the heat, as though mocking the fragility of human grandeur. Word spreads like wildfire. Hideyoshi is dead. The man who rose from carrying sandals to ruling all Japan is gone. At first, the machinery of his government stumbles forward. Decrees are issued in Hideyoshi's name. Regents bow stiffly and maintain the facade of unity. In the markets of Kyoto, merchants reassure themselves that peace will continue. But in their eyes, you catch the flicker of doubt. In the villages, peasants murmur that war is coming again. Samurai polish their swords with renewed intensity, as if they too can smell the storm in the air. You walk through Osaka Castle, and what once felt like a fortress of triumph now feels like a gilded cage. Hideyoshi's mother, Yododono, clutches her son, fiercely watching every retainer with suspicion. The golden tiles still glitter on the rooftops, but the halls echo with unease. The Toyotomi family may hold the symbols of power, but power itself is beginning to seep away like water through sand. And far to the east, one man watches with patience sharpened over decades, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Unlike Nobunaga's reckless thunder or Hideyoshi's dazzling charm, Ieyasu is deliberate, quiet, and calculating. He has survived countless storms by bending when he must and striking only when certain. While other daimyo shout, he listens. While others squabble, he smiles. You see his influence quietly expanding alliances, whispered into being families, tied by marriage retainers, bribed or persuaded. He does not need to declare ambition. His every step reveals it. Meanwhile, the regents begin to fracture. Some fear Ieyasu's growing power. Others seek to balance him by forming rival alliances. The council chambers that once echoed with Hideyoshi's booming commands now hum with suspicion, whispered insults, and veiled threats. Every decision land, disputes appointments, marriages becomes a potential spark for conflict. The common people sense it too. In Kyoto, you overhear merchants fretting over which lord to curry favor with now. In the countryside, peasants whisper that the peace of the Toyotomi is already dying. Ashikaga, recently disbanded from the failed Korean Wars, drift through villages looking for masters to serve again. Banditry rises, and with it, the ominous feeling that the Sengoku chaos is clawing its way back. You realize with a heavy sigh that Hideyoshi's greatest achievement, unifying Japan, may also be his greatest fragility. He built it around himself, not around institutions that could endure beyond him. And unlike Nobunaga, who died in fire and battle, Hideyoshi dies in his bed, leaving behind not a dramatic martyrdom, but an unfinished legacy. His ambition outlasted his strength, and his final command to protect his son may prove impossible to keep. As night falls, you stand on Osaka's walls and gaze across the darkened city. Lanterns glow softly in the distance, but the silence is deceptive. Hideyoshi's death has not brought calm. It has left a void. And in a land like this, voids never remain empty for long. The question is not if someone will seize it, but who. You can almost hear the faint shuffle of Tokugawa Ieyasu's sandals already moving toward that answer. The air after Hideyoshi's death feels heavier, as if the whole land is holding its breath. Osaka Castle gleams like a gilded mountain, but the Toyotomi family's grip already feels brittle. Behind the golden screens and polite ceremonies, daimyo mutter in corners, weighing loyalty against ambition. And in the east, one man sharpens his plans with the patience of a spider weaving its web, Tokugawa Ieyasu. You first notice him not through fire or thunder, Nobunaga's tools, but through quiet gestures. Ieyasu writes letters, arranges marriages, trades, hostages, and promises favors. He does not rush. He does not bluster. He lets others fight and exhaust themselves while he waits for the perfect moment. It's a strategy that makes him look cautious, even plotting, but underneath lies cold calculation. He has survived Nobunaga's temper, Hideyoshi's charisma, and countless battlefield storms. Now, with both giants gone, he is the last of the great survivors. You follow him into his audience chamber. He greets daimyo with warmth, his face calm, his words careful. He promises safety, prosperity, and stability, three things a weary land craves. But behind the promises are hooks. Each alliance binds rivals to him. Each marriage pulls families into his orbit. Slowly, almost invisibly, the Toyotomi regents find themselves isolated, while Ieyasu's power swells like a tide. Meanwhile, unrest grows. Rival factions quarrel over how to govern in Hideyori's name. Some cling to loyalty to the Toyotomi child. Others resent Yododono's influence at Osaka Castle. Armies begin to gather under various banners, excuses ready, swords sharp. You wander through the countryside and see villages once again, stocking rice pits, women carrying children into forest hideouts, farmers muttering that war is coming back. It is as though the ghost of the Sengoku period refuses to stay buried. Ieyasu, ever patient, nudges the pieces into place. He stations his allies, strategically whispers, with hesitant lords, and promises rewards to those who side with him. He knows that open defiance of Hideyori is dangerous, while memories of Hideyoshi remain strong. But he also knows time is on his side. A child cannot lead armies. A widow cannot command daimyo. Eventually, even loyalty frays when ambition beckons. By 1600, the tension is unbearable. Rumors spread like sparks in dry grass. Who supports the Toyotomi? Who supports Tokugawa? Old grudges flare. Secret letters are intercepted. Spies whisper of betrayals. You feel it in your bones. Japan is about to gamble everything in one colossal throw of the dice. You walk through Ieyasu's camp one night and watch him at work. He pores over maps by candlelight. His hands steady his mind, weighing risks. Unlike Nobunaga, who burned enemies in fire, or Hideyoshi, who charmed them into surrender, Ieyasu prefers inevitability. He doesn't need to look brilliant. He only needs to look like the safest choice. And in a fractured, weary land, safety is the most seductive promise of all. Still, not everyone bends so easily. Lords loyal to Hideyori rally under Ishida Mitsunari, a Toyotomi administrator determined to resist Tokugawa's growing shadow. Mitsunari is clever, perhaps too clever, and his rigid sense of principle grates on rougher warriors. but he becomes the figurehead of resistance. Soon, the country is divided into two great camps, East versus West Tokugawa, against Toyotomi loyalists. You can almost hear the ground shudder as armies muster. Rice stores are emptied to feed tens of thousands. Blacksmiths hammer day and night forging spears and matchlocks. Messengers gallop between castles, their banners streaming. Japan, briefly unified under Hideyoshi, is fracturing again into two titanic forces, each convinced they hold the nation's fate. And through it all, Ieyasu smiles. He tells his men to prepare, but he does not rush. He lets his rivals move. First, lets them make mistakes. Lets them reveal weaknesses. You realize his genius isn't in boldness or brilliance, it's in patience sharpened into a weapon. He waits like a hawk circling high above, knowing eventually his prey will stumble. The pieces are nearly set. East and West glare at each other across the chessboard, and the air vibrates with the promise of battle. You sense that the next clash will not be another skirmish in the endless wars of the past. No, this will be decisive. This will determine not just who holds Kyoto, but who holds all Japan. And so you walk with Ieyasu as he tightens the strings of his web, his every step deliberate, his every word calculated. In the distance, autumn mists curl over valleys, and you know the land is bracing for the storm that will decide its destiny. Autumn settles over Japan in 1600 crisp air, sharpening every sound mist curling over harvested fields. You stand in the heart of the country at Sekigahara, a broad plain hemmed by mountains where the fate of the nation will be decided in a single day. For decades, war has ebbed and flowed, but always without finality. Today, nearly 160,000 men gather Tokugawa Ieyasu's eastern forces against Ishida Mitsunari's western coalition. It is the largest clash Japan has ever seen, and everyone knows it will decide the future. The days before the battle are thick with tension. You drift between camps and feel the contrast. In Mitsunari's camp, discipline strains under the weight of suspicion. His coalition is powerful on paper, but many daimyo have joined reluctantly, their loyalty uncertain. Some distrust Mitsunari, a bureaucrat more skilled with scrolls than swords. Others harbor old grudges against each other, barely held together by shared opposition to Tokugawa. The air tastes sour with doubt. Across the plain, Ieyasu's camp hums with quiet confidence. He does not rant or roar. He speaks calmly, reminding his men that they fight for stability, for the chance to end chaos and bring order at last. Behind the speeches lie promises, lands titles, safety for those who fight, and perhaps for those who betray Mitsunari at the right moment. You sense the weight of his web. He has spent months whispering into the ears of rival lords, planting seeds of doubt that may bloom at the crucial hour. Dawn breaks on October 21st. The valley is cloaked in mist dew, soaking the tall grasses. You hear the rumble of drums, the crackle of muskets being primed, the nervous snorts of horses. Banners snap overhead, white circles of Tokugawa, the varied crests of Western clans. As the mist lifts, the two armies stare across the plain, a sea of armor and spears stretching farther than the eye can follow. The clash begins with volleys of musket fire smoke drifting like low clouds across the field. Ashigaru surge forward, spears bristling their sandals sinking into mud. Arrows hiss, drums pound, and the roar of tens of thousands drowns out thought. You stumble through the chaos, the smell of gunpowder, thick ears ringing from explosions. To one side, cavalry charges slam into spear walls, horses screaming as they crash. For hours, the battle teeters. Mitsunari's forces are strong, and at first they push hard against Tokugawa's line. You hear cries of victory in the western ranks. But then comes the moment Ieyasu has waited for. he signals, and daimyo he has secretly courted begin to falter. Kobayakawa Hideaki, perched on a hill with 15,000 men, has wavered all morning. Mitsunari expects him to charge against Tokugawa. Instead, under a barrage of gunfire and shouted threats, Kobayakawa suddenly turns and attacks the western flank. The betrayal is like a blade through the coalition's heart. Panic ripples through Mitsunari's lines. Some lords flee, others switch sides outright, and the cohesion of the Western army shatters. You watch Mitsunari himself, frantic, trying to rally men who are already melting away. His once mighty host collapses into a fleeing mob. By afternoon, the plain is a maelstrom of broken banners, discarded weapons, and fleeing soldiers. Tokugawa's men press forward relentlessly, cutting down stragglers, seizing standards, and capturing rival commanders. The mist that began the day now returns as smoke rising from burning camps and abandoned supplies. Mud sucks at your sandals stained with blood. When the dust settles, Tokugawa Ieyasu stands unchallenged. His victory at Sekigahara is absolute. Mitsunari is captured days later, paraded in disgrace, and executed. Other rivals are stripped of their lands or forced into submission. The web Ieyasu spun has tightened into an iron cage around all of Japan. As night falls on the battlefield, you walk among the bodies. Ashikaga lies side by side, with samurai muskets, scattered banners trampled. Crows circle overhead. The scale is staggering tens of thousands dead or wounded in a single day. For ordinary peasants, this plain is just another scar, another harvest lost to the appetites of warlords. But for the nation, it is the pivot. After centuries of chaos, one man has seized the power to end the cycle. Ieyasu does not proclaim victory with arrogance. He simply sets his jaw issues orders and begins the work of cementing his rule. While others sought glory, he sought inevitability, and at Sekigahara, inevitability arrived. You feel it in your bones as you leave the plain. The age of open chaos has ended. The storm has chosen its master. From here, Tokugawa Ieyasu will rise as shogun, and Japan will enter an age of enforced peace, rigid and unyielding. But on this night, the plain of Sekigahara is silent, except for the rustle of wind through grass, a whisper of all the voices lost to shape a single day of destiny. The morning after, Sekigahara mist curls low over the plain, muffling the moans of the wounded. Crows pick at discarded helmets, and the banners that once thundered with pride now lie tattered in the mud. You walk slowly through the aftermath, your sandals squelching every step, heavy with the realization that you've just witnessed the hinge on which an entire country has turned. Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient spider of the East, has won. From here, the pieces fall quickly. Mitsunari is dragged to Kyoto. Humiliated, executed, his head displayed as a warning. Those who oppose Tokugawa are stripped of land, their clans broken, their castles seized. Others who wisely or opportunistically switch sides at Sekigahara are rewarded with vast new domains. The chessboard of Japan is rearranged in a matter of weeks, all under Ieyasu's steady hand. By 1603, the transformation is complete. Ieyasu receives the title of shogun from the emperor, reviving an institution that had withered into irrelevance under the Ashikaga. But this is not the weak shogunate of old. The Tokugawa regime is something altogether different. Rigid, methodical, suffocatingly stable. The long storm of the Sengoku has finally ended, not with one more duel of giants, but with the quiet tightening of rules that will bind the nation for centuries. You stroll through Edo, once a swampy backwater, now the beating heart of Tokugawa's power. Castles rise, moats gleam, and merchants bustle in the shadow of towering gates. Samurai patrol the streets, their daisho gleaming, But the days of constant skirmishes are gone. Ieyasu has decreed peace, and peace will be enforced with chains of law. Daimyo are ordered to split their time between Edo and their home provinces, their families held effectively as hostages to ensure obedience. Roads are monitored, armies, restricted alliances broken. The warlords who once dreamed of independence now bow in carefully rehearsed humility. At first, the people hardly know how to respond. Peasants wait nervously for the next raid, only to realize none is coming. Samurai trained for endless battle find themselves turning into bureaucrats, their swords more ceremonial than practical. Merchants once despised quietly rise and influence their coin, flowing into the cracks of a society obsessed with order. You sense the paradox humming beneath it all. After more than a century of chaos, the Japanese people finally breathe easier. Yet that breath comes under the watchful gaze of a government that will tolerate no rebellion, no dissent, no ambition too great. The land exhales, yes, but it exhales into a rigid mold. As decades pass, the age of the country at war becomes a memory, then a legend. Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu are whispered like characters from a great drama lightning fire and stone. The demon king who burned temples, the peasant genius who built an empire from nothing, the patient schemer who turned betrayal into destiny. Each carved Japan in his own way, but only Ieyasu built a system that would last beyond his grave. You walk once more through Kyoto lanterns, glowing softly, the city rebuilt and orderly. The scars of the Sengoku remain, but they are hidden beneath layers of calm. A new generation grows up, never knowing the chaos of marching armies, believing peace is the natural order of things. But you drifting through the night with the weight of memory know better. You remember the smoke of Okehazama, the screams on Mount Hiei, the thunder at Nagashino, the betrayal at Honnō-ji, the mud of Sekigahara. You remember that peace was not gifted, it was hammered into place by blood and fire. And so, the age of the samurai's greatest wars ends not with a clash, but with a silence enforced by law. The land, at last, is still. And now, as the echoes of battle fade and the plain of Sekigahara dissolves into mist, let your mind ease. The clamor of drums, the clash of steel, the smoke of burning temples, those were the storms of another age. Tonight, they are only whispers, fading like the last notes of a distant shamisen. You are no longer trudging through mud or cowering beneath war banners. You are lying still, breathing slowly, while the warriors of centuries past rest in their graves. The rice fields that once fed armies now ripple quietly in the wind. Castles that bristled with spears now stand empty, their moats filled with drifting leaves. Even the golden tiles of Osaka Castle gleam not with ambition, but with the soft glow of the setting sun. Picture the lanterns of Edo, flickering along peaceful streets, their light, gentle, steady, safe. Hear the wooden clatter of Geta sandals, not soldiers marching, but children running home. The world that once screamed with chaos now hums with order, and in that hum there is comfort. Let the storm that raged across centuries lull you now, not with fear, but with calm. The battles have been fought, the fates decided, and the restless spirits of Nobunaga Hideyoshi and Ieyasu have long since drifted into the quiet beyond. All that remains is stillness. So let your breath grow long, your eyes grow heavy. The age of samurai has ended, but the peace that followed is yours to keep tonight. Drift then into sleep, carried not by the thunder of guns, but by the hush of a land finally at rest. Sweet dreams.